Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Novelists Unwind. I'm Johnnie Alexander, and I am here with a wonderful author, Heidi Chiavaroli. So glad to have her with us, and we're just going to talk a little bit about Heidi's journey, which has been a real interesting one. I was reading your About page and just found that so fascinating. When they talk about writing journeys, it's definitely a journey.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for having me, Johnnie. This is really fun.
Yeah, I'm really glad we could work this out. So it's fun. So Heidi's first book, her debut novel, is called Freedom's Ring. I think she has a copy of it to show us. Award-winning book. I mean, 4.5 stars from Romantic Times, was a top pick. Book List gave it, was part of their top 10 romance debut. I just started reading it last night, could hardly put it down. So tell us a little bit about Freedom's Ring, the premise of that, and then I want to talk to you about how that story came together.
Sure. Well, Freedom's Ring is about a woman who's in the Boston Marathon bombing, and she's left with this antique ring from a mysterious savior. After she finds him, they together unearth the 200-year-old history of a woman who suffered tremendous loss in the Boston Massacre, a woman who is torn between the love of two men, one a patriot and one a redcoat. So it is a time slip story, which is what my publisher is calling it. So it goes back and forth between the contemporary story and the historical.
And you do that so well. I mean, because for one thing, they're both written in first person, which is not an easy way to tell a story anyway. Right. And then you've got these two very different heroines, and the language is different. So which one was the easiest one to write, the contemporary or the historical character?
That's an interesting question, because I started out writing them both, how it was written, contemporary, historical. And, the historical, of course, is a little more difficult because it has its challenges. You got to make sure things are historically accurate, and you have to get into this voice that isn't how we talk every day so much. I tried to make it readable and not too, crazy. But I think, the historical was probably definitely more difficult. But as I said, I started writing them just how it's written, and eventually I left the contemporary story and went on with Liberty's story, who is the historical heroine. And I just kind of sensed that this was really going to be grounded in her story, and I needed to kind of see how that was going to play out. And then I went back to Annie's story. So it seems like that's the pattern that's happening with these time slip stories, but I never know which character, which story is going to kind of grab me first. And
That's really interesting that you said that. And of course, the language is so different because you use a lot of, I don't know that you call them idioms, but the language of that time, in which gives it such authenticity. And so you live in Massachusetts. Have you always lived in Massachusetts?
I have. I'm born and raised here. Yep, I grew up just four miles down the road.
Oh my gosh! Wow!
I don't get around a lot, so I had to write something from Massachusetts.
So you've been steeped, though, like I guess, in American Revolutionary history.
Sure. Yeah, it's always been, a part of course what we're learning. Although I assume most schools, probably Massachusetts has a lot of, history.
Mm-hmm.
But it's funny because I had never even went to Boston except for like an 8th grade field trip.
Oh, wow.
It wasn't, even though we're only an hour away, I actually took my mom to Boston for the first time last fall. She had never been.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and that was super, super fun. And I know it sounds crazy, but you can kind of stay away from it if you want to. So we just didn't go. But once I started writing and discovered this history, I just couldn't stay away.
Sure. So how, I almost don't know where to begin with this, because I know this was not the first manuscript you've written.
Right.
Yeah. So, let's stick with it for just a minute. How did you come up with putting those two things together, the Boston Massacre and the And for those who might not know, because it's been a long time for some of us since we've been in school, what is the Boston Massacre? And then how did you put that together with the Boston Marathon?
Okay, great question. I always, before I wrote this book, this is my 6th manuscript, I wrote a lot of historical. So I always knew that a historical story in revolutionary Boston was waiting for me, but, I didn't know when. After the Boston Marathon bombing happened, and that was just months after the Sandy Hook tragedy, I was just like really shaken up, and my faith was shaken up. I didn't want to send my kids to school. I just had this ugly feeling of distrust, like in public. It was really like an ugly place of fear and anxiety. I ran I've ran several marathons. I've never run. I've never run Boston. I've always dreamed of it. So, and just being geographically sandwiched between the 2 tragedies, having kids the same age as Sandy Hook, this time just really hit me, and that's when I turned to my writing, and I didn't expect to write this theme, but it just came about because it was something that was just what I was living. I was inspired to write the time slip because I had started reading some, especially Susan Meissner. She's just amazing. And I loved how she put stories together, because it was kind of the best of both worlds. And I was hearing that historicals were kind of tanking, but I loved historicals. I didn't want to let them go, but I love a good contemporary story too. So this just seemed like the best of both worlds. So I combined the Boston Massacre. The Boston Massacre occurred in 1770. So it was actually 5 years before the beginning of the official beginning of the American Revolution. But it was at the time of British occupation in Boston. And it was just this crazy mob that, there was always tension between the regulars and the colonists. And this mob just kind of was goading a bunch of these soldiers one night, and they ended up opening fire on them, and 5 of them were killed. That did end up, the British soldiers then left Boston because of that. But, then we have the Tea Party a few years later, and things really start heating up. And then, as you also will see in Freedom's Ring, we have the Battle of Lexington and Concord, and the official start of the American Revolution. So I've always been fascinated by that, and I've always been fascinated with the Boston Marathon, and it just seemed like, I'll put these together.
well, I knew you ran. I saw that on your bio, but I didn't know you actually ran in marathons. That's great.
Yeah, I haven't in a while, but I always have a special place for it in my heart,
Yeah, and then that gives that, you start out, Freedom's Ring starts out with the heroine running the marathon. It's like, how that feels being.
Oh yeah.
It's torture. And the aching and all of that. It's like, that's
right.
Cool.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. I love running. It is torture in a way, but it's like some type of a self-test that I'm like addicted to. It's weird.
No, I think that's great. I am not athletic at all. At all. And I started running, give an idea about my age. I decided I was going to run. I wanted to run 5K.
Oh, good.
I did, and it was just after my 50th birthday, and I ran 2 5Ks. And I did have to stop. I wasn't able to run the whole 3.
Yeah,
but
that's
okay. Yeah, but I did pretty good, and I did it. And then my knees started hurting all the time. It's like I felt like I couldn't
on your body, the constant pounding.
Yeah.
One of the reasons
But I wish I could, because it really, when I was even, I guess, training for, and just doing it, I was very dedicated. I was going to fly to Chicago one day. I got up at 4:00 in the morning and did that day's, regimen of what you were supposed to do to prepare for this. And
wow.
It's like, I don't do that kind of thing very often because I like sleep.
Yeah. I don't blame you. And the last year or so, I really appreciated like the beauty of a good walk.
Yeah.
Great sometimes.
Walking's nice. It doesn't hurt your knees so much.
Right,
Oh my gosh, that's great. So, okay, let's go back then. This was your sixth manuscript, and I really love that you just tell this story on your website about kind of the bumps in the road. So, can you just quickly tell us a little bit about how you got from that dream and keeping it a secret from everybody to
Yeah.
finally?
Right. So I started writing when my sons were little, and it was during their nap times. They were 16 months apart. They took naps at the same time. So I would just write during their nap time and just try to kind of explore this desire that I had. And I kept it a secret from everybody, including my husband. Because I just thought it was kind of this crazy thing, you know? Eventually I did tell him, and he was very encouraging. And that was in 2006. I entered the Genesis contest for unpublished writers. That was by ACFW, American Christian Fiction Writers. And I got horrible scores back from that contest, along with a no response from my first agent targeted query. So after that, I just put the writing aside, thought I didn't have what it took. That was several months, but I just couldn't imagine not writing at that point. So God just kept pulling me back to it. So I figured if I didn't have talent, I was going to work as hard as I could to try and make this happen. Kind of like running a marathon, you know?
Yeah.
So joined a critique group, kept entering contests, kept getting rejections. Fast forward to 2014, so 8 years later, I actually ended up winning the Genesis contest in the historical category.
Yay.
Yeah, that was really fun. That win helped me land my current agent, who is actually that agent I had sent that query to all those years ago. So cool.
That's crazy.
Yeah, and then I was with the agency about 18 months when I handed in manuscript number 6, Freedom's Ring, to my agent. And I just had put everything I had in this, and I was homeschooling my kids at the time, and we needed a little help. So I went down the street to my local Walmart and I got a part-time night job at the garden center. So I'll never forget. I always tell this story because I just love it.
Oh, I loved it too. I thought it was so cute.
I'll never forget that that beautiful May night. My husband came in with my 2 boys, and I always say, I just put down my leaky hose and wipe my hands on my super attractive blue smock. And I really did almost faint in the petunias when my husband told me that my agent had left a message on our home phone with news of a contract offer from my dream publisher, which was Tyndale House Publishers.
Tyndale's great.
Oh, yeah, I know you know them too.
yeah, they did my historical too, and I do. They're just wonderful. So it was fun reading your acknowledgments and seeing familiar names in there. Yeah.
So fun. They're great. They're still my dream publisher after working with them, and they're just
good.
So that was that.
And not just one book, but you got a 2-book contract.
Yes.
Great.
Yes.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about the second one and show us that cover.
This is actually an arc, but it's called The Hidden Side, and it's releasing May 8th of this year. It's a little bit, I almost want to, it's horrible because this is a bad marketing thing, but I always want to tell people it's kind of a hard book. Like, I want to warn them, which is probably not good marketing. But it is a bit of a hard book. It's about a family that is torn apart by the unspeakable actions of one of its members, and how a woman from the past helps them to heal. So the historical portion is revolving around a real life historical character, although they don't know her identity. So that kind of gave me some room to play around. But there was a woman who was a part of George Washington's spy ring based out of New York during the Revolution. And so I kind of took, her character and fictionalized it. And that was fun. Yeah.
Oh, that sounds really intriguing too. And now, and it's kind of different because it's, well, I mean, I don't know since I haven't looked at it. I don't have the arc, but I just from reading the descriptions and also you've got the contemporary part, and then you have, I guess, the interspersed with journal entries.
It's not journal entries. It's much the same as set up as Freedom's Ring. There's actually two contemporary main characters in the hidden side and one historical main character.
Oh,
So
wow.
I alternate chapters throughout the book.
So you really have 3 points
Yeah.
of view. Wow. Are they all written in first person?
Yes.
Wow.
I don't know what it is. I love first person. I know it's not easy to do, and hopefully I pulled it off okay.
Well,
but
you do. I mean, from what I've read, in I'm only about maybe a quarter of the way through Heidi's first book. I was able to get it last night and started it. And it is fabulous. But yeah, you do first person very well, and it's not always easy to do well. So
Thank you.
well, good. And 3 of them. Wow, I am impressed.
Yeah, thank you. Well, hopefully people like the book.
I bet they will. I'm sure they will. I can't wait. I can't wait to see it. One thing I like too that you said on your website, you said that you like to explore. I love this. I wrote it down. Quote: places that whisper of historical secrets.
Yeah.
And that just, I mean, it just touched my heart because I have never worded it that way, but I feel that same way. So I'm sure you tap into a lot of people by phrasing it. There are a lot of people out there that feel that they want to explore these places that whisper of historical secrets. Tell us, what are some of your favorite places?
Yeah. Well, obviously I love Boston. I mean, there's so much history there, but yet there's so much of this contemporary culture. It was very kind of easy to put them alongside each other in this one. Honestly, one of my favorite places where my imagination just always runs wild is the Cliff Walk in Newport, Rhode Island.
Oh, I don't know about that, so tell me.
All the Newport mansions are along this cliff walk. So you have all these awesome mansions on one side and just the Atlantic Ocean on the other side. And it just, my imagination goes crazy just thinking about these people that lived there all those years ago. That's one example, but anytime I go, we have some woods not far from our house, and there's a big rock, and it's called Abram's Rock because there's a legend that an Indian hid there, and there's a big cave in it, and it's just like, what? Like, these people were really alive, and it's just like, that's my imagination on fire. I love it.
Oh, wow, that's cool. Well, then, and I read on your website, which is beautiful, by the way. I love your website and the photos. So I was going to the Nathan Hale part, and I think this might have actually been a blog post. I don't remember if it was just a page or post, but you were driving, and you'd already written the book, and you saw a sign that said Nathan Hale's homestead.
Yeah. So Nathan Hale is one of the main characters in the hidden side. And I was coming home from the New England Retreat for Christian Writing in Connecticut, and I saw this sign, and I had already written the book. It was handed in. I think I had just finished edits too, so there wasn't like there were going to be any major changes.
Right.
You have to see this place because I wrote about this man, and yet this place is right here where he grew up. I'm like, I couldn't even imagine just driving past,
Yeah.
So I went there, and just a beautiful Sunday afternoon. It was just the most perfect day, and nobody was on this estate. It wasn't closed. I could drive up to it, but nobody was there. It was the most peaceful, quiet. And I'm just imagining Nathan as a little child just running through these fields. I mean, he was born here, and just what ends up happening to him is very sad. But I just felt this peace, like this man was real. As far as we know, he was a Christian, and it was just it was really really special. Yeah.
And he was for those of you who may not remember your history, and one reason I was thinking, I think I know who this is, but I got to double check. So he was hung as a spy.
Yes. So he he was sent by General Washington into Manhattan. So they were occupied by the British at that time. And this is how they did spying back then. They would just send somebody into enemy territory, and hopefully they would come back with some information. Now, Nathan, as far as what I've read about him, he probably wasn't the best guy for the job. He was just very open and honest. He ended up giving himself away. He did end up being hung as a spy. And, that kind of changed General Washington's tactics on how he was going to do this. And this is where the Culper spy ring comes into play. And I don't know if anybody watches Turn, Washington Spies. It's a series. This is where that comes into play, where General Washington decides he's going to use people who already have a reason for being in British occupied Manhattan to get his information. And then they develop a whole ring, and information gets from Manhattan back to,
wow.
Yeah.
I haven't watched that, but my mom, when she was alive, she liked watching that show. So maybe I'll go back and see it.
Yeah, it's a great show. It's a great show. They do an amazing job with it.
Wow, that's really cool. That's really cool. Oh my gosh. So, any of the books that you've written before, 1 through 5, those manuscripts, are they like tucked away forever, or do you have plans to bring them back out? Yeah.
There will be one releasing next year.
Good.
I'm actually going to be putting it out myself. So we'll see how that goes, because that's going to be a new adventure for me.
Heidi, I'm probably going to do the same thing. I've got one kind of put away, and it's actually with an editor, freelance editor right now, because I was really having it's been in my head so long. It's like, I don't really know exactly where some things need to be. Yeah. And so, but I think I'm going to be doing the same. So we need to.
We need to talk more.
Talk.
Each other out. Yeah, right.
Yeah, because it's brand new and kind of scary.
But I'm excited too.
Yeah, me too.
We'll see what happens.
Is it a time slip story too?
This one is. Yeah, this is the only other time slip I've written aside from these two. So we'll see.
Too. So except it's not really contemporary, because it's like 1990s, because it's World War II in 1990s. So that's about as far as I could get. I love it. I mean, I love it.
I know how you feel. I love I totally understand, because we have these stories that are just our babies, and I hope I've learned a lot, and hopefully I can go back and make it a good story for readers.
So is it also Revolutionary era or
no?
Something?
And this was one of the hang-ups about selling it. It actually goes back to King Philip's War. And actually it's called Abram's Rock. So it's about that rock.
That rock. Wow.
Yeah, but
I'm gonna read that one too.
No, you're sweet. Yeah, it's about a troubled marriage, the contemporary story, and there's a journal in it, but I haven't honed it down really good, so we'll get there. But
that's really cool. And again, I just think it's really encouraging, and my story is a little bit similar to Heidi's, and I refer to it different times in these interviews. Starting writing way early, winning the historical contest is with Genesis. I think mine was 2011 was when Our Treasure Hides won, but then that propelled it to Tyndale, and so forth. And it's something that if you really have it within you, and God's given you that call to write and that talent to write, and you have that feeling of I can't not write.
Absolutely.
You just have to stick with it, and it may take 10 years or longer.
Absolutely. And who's to say how God is going to use it? Maybe he's going to touch just one reader that needs to hear something, and
that's true.
That's worth it,
It really, really is. Well, this has been so much fun. I am just, I love it. I actually just noticed one more little quote. I'm just going to say this real quick on your website, because I love this too. Stories make us more alive, more human, more courageous, more loving, by Madeline, and I'm never for sure how to say her last name. Lingle?
I think I say it Liangle, but I'm not sure if that's right.
I'm not sure either, but you know, the Wrinkle in Time author. So, are you a big fan of hers, or love his quote?
I've read A Wrinkle in Time and I loved it, but I just saw that quote and it just spoke to me. I was like, yes, this is why I do what I do, you know, because it's about being more alive and exploring the journeys of, you know, our humanity and what that means. And we have, I think about these time slip stories, and even though these characters are centuries apart, there's still a bond they have, because no matter how much we advance in technology, we all have the same struggles with our hearts, and that's not really going to go away. So you know, that's why I write.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Well, last question I ask everybody. When you're all done, you type the end. How do you unwind?
Oh my goodness. The real answer, I almost don't want to tell you because it's embarrassing. I have a little OCD and I really like a clean house.
Oh.
So I will clean my house like really, really good. And I know that's not exciting. I'll do house projects. I'll finally watch a movie with my husband.
Yeah.
But isn't that horrible that cleaning thing comes to my mind?
Everybody has their own thing.
Yeah.
That's cute.
Yeah.
That's cute. I love it. All right. Well, thank you so much, Heidi. Show us your books again. Freedom's Ring is out now. Again, 4.5 stars from Romantic Times. It was a top pick for them. Book list, top 10 romance debut. There's a lot of competition for those awards, so it's just wonderful, and Heidi deserves them. I mean, the story is just, from what I've read so far, it's fabulous. And then The Hidden Side coming out in May. So that would be really cool
so
too.
much. Thank you for having me. This has been so fun.
Thank you too. And thanks everybody for watching, and come back next time for another episode of Novelists Unwind. Bye-bye.